signing off on all of those improvements, and we still don't really have a full appreciation of what additional improvements they may ask us to make before they're willing to sign off on the fire alarm system.
I will say that that's not consistent, Alan, with the meeting, with the conversation which we had at our most recent operating corporation meeting, in which we were advised that the class, I don't know if it's the Class E system or whatever the system is there, has been reviewed and approved by the fire department.
Well, I think it's an ongoing process. They come in and they review it depending upon where we are on the stage of construction.
No, we were told at the last meeting, Alan, that the fire department, and this is a matter of great concern to me personally as well as to other members of the operating committee board, we were told that had been reviewed and approved by the fire department very explicitly. So I'm surprised to hear. And I'd like to know, in another setting, I'd like to know what the facts are around that, but the idea that somehow there are still bills associated with development and installation of the fire alarm system when we are told at the last operating committee meeting that system was operational. Is there another member of the operating committee here who will confirm that? That is a shocking thing for me to hear. I'm not happy about it.
Operational is different than the FDNY signing off on it.
We heard it had been signed off.
Okay. We have an operational system. It's significantly upgraded from what we started with, but we are still working with FDNY on getting their sign-off and acceptance of the system.
I appreciate that. All I'm saying is I think in that case we're going to need to take this, we have to revisit this issue at the operating level.
I'd be happy to give you
I think that'd be helpful.
A full review of what. So again, these are outside limits of spending. These are my best efforts to capture what might be coming due over the next 2 to 3 months to close the scope of the renovation out further. And then what we can do is at the next meeting we can give you a full recitation of how much was expensed against each one of these line items for hard and soft costs.
That would be very helpful, and I don't think it's your obligation. Well, that would be very helpful. I do think, as a member of both this board and the operating committee board, it is very, very important that we have a clear understanding of the status of this fire alarm system in there. And I'd like Alan or you, somebody somehow to report to the board on what exactly is the status, because we were left with the impression as members at the last meeting that this system was reviewed, approved, and operational by the FDNY. Anything to the contrary is troubling to me. I'd like to know why and what the schedule is to bring it to completion.
Okay. I just want to clarify something and make sure that we don't leave people with the wrong impression. There is a fire alarm system that the FDNY has been working with us on over the last 4 years.
I'm
and
aware
we
of that.
make significant improvements to the system at their request. Whenever they request something, modifications, upgrades, we've committed to them right up front that we will make any and all improvements that they request of us. So we have a system that is significantly more enhanced and better than when we started 4 years ago. It's operational and we continue to work through the BNY to them giving us a formal sign. Glenn, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I mean, right now, my understanding of it, that the plans have been submitted to the fire department, the present plans, with the upgrades, and it's in a review process, and then they come back for a final testing, just to make sure everything's there. So they're reviewing the plans, the final plans, and that's the state of all the equipment is operational. And what's happened previously, I think what Bob was alluding to, is that they've come up with something new on a number of occasions when they came back during a review process.
I'm not surprised by that. I'm just trying to, and I think it's great, it's very important that we have improved the fire alarm system. I'm just trying to understand the divergence between the two reports from these two entities. That's all that's happening here.
I'll give you
Okay, thank you.
where we stand. So, are we ready to...
I just want to ask you a question, Bob. The spending plan for FY 2015 was $2.5 million, right?
Yes,
And
will
is
be
there money-
for 15, 16.
Okay, and is there money still left over from that?
Yes.
Okay, how much?
When we finish closing out the project, with my estimates of what these closeout numbers will be, I believe we'll have approximately $3.5 million that will be under budget and with 363. So that those would be funds that we could make available for other reasons.
Okay.
But until we close everything out.
Understood.
actually,
And this, for the $2 million, that's over and above, or that's over and above the 2.5, or?
Once we expense down, say we expense down all of 4.5, assuming that, we would still have approximately $3.5 million remaining in the $463 million that would have been in contingency.
That's your question. Any more questions from the directors or from the public? If not, I'll entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
Second? All in favor? Thank you. I will now ask Jonathan Byer to present an item relating to the adoption of revised procurement guidelines for the corporation. Jonathan?
Thank you. Good afternoon to everyone. Almost exactly a year ago, the New York Convention Center Development Corporation Board adopted guidelines for the use, awarding, monitoring, and reporting of procurement contracts as mandated by the Public Authorities Law. Although there have been a few small administrative changes that really make the process sort of more user-friendly and centralized, there really have been no substantive changes to the guidelines. However, the Public Authorities Law also requires that these guidelines, along with certain other guidelines, are adopted each and every year prior to March 31st, which is why we're sort of having this anniversary now at a very convenient time. At its March 19th meeting, the ESD, Empire State Development Corp., the parent, adopted these revised guidelines, and those guidelines are designated and designed to govern procurement by subsidiaries such as CCDC. Accordingly, we are now seeking the annual approval of these procurement guidelines by the Board of Directors.
Any questions or comments?
Okay, none from the public, so we have a motion, please.
So moved.
Second? All in favor? All right, thank you. Barbara, will you now please present the next two items on the agenda?
Sure.
We'll vote after each item is presented. Let's start with the three qualified appraisals.
Right, all we're asking for here is authorization to adopt the established New York State Urban Development Corporation, DBA, Empire State Development, slate of pre-qualified appraisals. So in August of 2014, ESD placed an advertisement in the state contract reporter requesting statements of qualification from firms experienced in areas of real estate and personal property appraisal. They went through the proper procurement process, and at its November 20, 2014 Board of Directors meeting, the Board of ESD parent approved the attached slate of appraisers for a 3-year term with the provision that the General Counsel be given the discretion to extend the term for 1 additional year. So what we're asking you is to adopt the same slate of appraisals as selected by ESD, so that we will then be in a position to use these pre-qualified appraisers for any future work we need to do in association with any future work on the convention center.
Okay, any questions on this item?
Yes, can I ask why we don't have the appraisers that you would expect to see on here, the Cushman & Wakefields and the CBREs of the world?
I did not conduct the solicitation, but I do know if you read through all of this, that there was a lot of direct outreach, there was advertising, there was a lot of specific outreach, and these are the appraisers who submitted qualifications.
I have to say, I find this very surprising, and I wonder what is going on in this regard. I know the other members who are active in the real estate world. Of these appraisers, while there are certainly some that are qualified, there are some, and I don't mean in any way to diminish them, some that we are using their agencies, in which I'm involved, This is not by any means a list that reflects the type of appraisers that are actually available in New York to do this work. And I would not be happy with this list if I were president or chairman of this agency, because it doesn't pick up people who are the most qualified appraisers in the business.
So here's a suggestion. We certainly can adopt this list, and that just gives us access to a pre-qualified list of appraisals. I defer to counsel, but that does not necessarily mean that if we had a specific need or use, that we couldn't conduct, the corporation could not conduct its own solicitation. This is just a pre-qualified list that allows us to
Expedite.
work on and expedite selection of an appraiser by soliciting several quotes from this list. That does not preclude us from conducting in the future a full-scale request for appraisals.
I think it's fair to say this list was given to the Development Corporation by higher authority.
Be that as it may, it's not the list, and I think that we should, I would like to note as a director that in the event that we do have the need for a real estate appraiser, that we specifically seek a broader group, that we publicly seek a broader group of people than are currently on this list, because I think this is not the type of a list which would result in us getting the best possible things.
Sure, I don't
Well,
believe we're
let me
precluded.
speak for the corporation, because I'm not 100% clear on who you have an issue with, but a lot of these appraisers...
I don't have an issue with any of these. I have an issue with people who are missing. I want to say, the people who are on here, some I know and believe are qualified, some I know and I have to say, I probably should recuse myself, I work with them. But what I'm concerned about is I feel this list does not pick up people who, if we as a board were acting, I would want to at least have said, hey, could you take a look at this and tell me what you think about this real estate valuation issue? And
Okay, can I finish now?
Sorry?
Can I finish now?
Excuse me.
Because I wasn't finished. You know, this list was selected by our legal division. To Barbara's point, you know, if there comes a time when we need to do an appraisal, if there are other firms that board members have an interest in including, we can certainly do a procurement for that. This is the pre-qualified list. This is kind of a pro forma activity we're undertaking here. And if there's something as significant as property disposition, where we would need to do an appraisal for one or potentially both of the properties, we certainly would want a list that the board is comfortable with.
Okay, so may I speak now? I appreciate that you're treating this as a pro forma matter, but nonetheless, in light of the fact that I strongly hope that we will have a meaningful property disposition, we can discuss that, what that might be, but I strongly hope that we will. And in light of the fact that the property disposition will involve property worth in excess of $500 million, I will tell you right now that I do not have an interest in any particular firm, but I do not feel confident with this list of firms.
Someone's coming. We're trying to ignore. Somebody is coming to.
I don't feel comfortable with this list of firms, and so I do not feel as a board of this corporation, a member of the board of this corporation, that this list in place provides the type of expertise that I would want to see applied to a property disposition undertaken by our board. And so whether it's pro forma or not, it's not acceptable to me in its present form for the purposes that I would expect we would use it.
The corporation's, if I may just interject for 1 second.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
The corporation's, ESD, the parent corporation's procurement guidelines are similar to what this board just adopted. And when we went for the RFP, the likelihood is perhaps some of the firms you're looking for to be weren't responsive or didn't want to respond to our RFP. So that's I'm just trying to say why they might not be on here. Or when we went out and interviewed, or we came to the corporation, again, I wasn't involved in this, but I just know our procurement process, they may not have wanted to be considered for one way or another, for one reason or another. So
I'm
things
sure
like that happen on a regular basis.
I'm sure that that's true, and I respect the fact that we had a procurement process and so forth, but nonetheless, we've come to the point where we're now on the verge of adopting a list which will allow the staff to use these people in conjunction with real estate appraisal services, and the list, in my humble opinion, is not a successful list, and we need to have an understanding in place that, for reasons which we can get into in more detail, if we do proceed to conduct a real estate disposition, we would need to not rely upon this list. And notwithstanding the fact it's a pre-qualified list, there's nothing that says you have, as this gentleman has pointed out, Mr. Chan has pointed out, there's nothing that says you have to use a pre-qualified list, but I'm making a different point, which is that the firms which should be on a list for the disposition of a massive piece of property in New York City are not on the list, and therefore, when we do conduct that appraisal, it would be, I would feel from the board point of view, that I would like to make it clear that I would not be comfortable if we relied solely on this list in seeking
Right.
advice.
And we will have full discussion of that, just that issue when the time comes.
So
And
can I make one discussion to the chairman? You know, if there is some concern that the ESD pre-approved appraiser list is not adequate, you know, if amenable, take requests or any suggestions for appraisal firms that could be considered and concurrently start a procurement process so we could have them at the ready.
Makes sense.
It does make a lot of sense.
Make a note of that, Barbara?
Yeah.
And Dave, we'll note your objection in our
Thank you.
the minutes for the
Great.
record.
Yeah, because I see those at this one.
Yes. Chip, you accused yourself of this.
Right.
So, I want to ask Jonathan, if I'm recused, can I sit here or? should
Yes,
I
you
leave
can,
the room?
you can sit here, just can't
But I'll be
vote.
quiet.
Yes.
Oh, that's a first.
I'll try.
Well, thank you and good afternoon. This item is to request that the board adopt ESD's slate of underwriters, financial advisors, and financial product providers. As detailed in your materials, ESD issued an RFP in 2012 seeking firms to serve in these capacities. The RFP was advertised in the New York State Contract Reporter as well as the Bond Buyer. It was posted on ESD's website and was emailed to numerous firms. The responses were evaluated by a team that included individuals from finance, treasury, and legal. And based on the team's evaluations, ESD's board approved the slate of underwriters, financial advisors, and financial product providers as shown in Attachment A in your board materials. We are requesting this authorization at this time because CCDC has a $698 million bond outstanding that was issued in 2005 that can be refunded at par this coming November. In order to proceed with the refunding, the corporation will need to enlist the services of underwriters and a financial advisor. In the coming months, I will return to the board to seek the necessary approvals to proceed with this refunding. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, Rob? Anything from the public? If not, I'll entertain a motion for approval, please.
So moved.
Second? All in favor? Thank you. Okay, next item is Glenn Johnson from Tishman, who's going to give us a report on the status of the project closeout for all the directors' information.
Yeah.
Okay, this is just kind of summarizing up the completion of the renovation. We've been off the site since October. The work has been complete. We're in the process of just closing out some of the last contractors, which is the additional scope we had done and so forth. And give you the update here. Of course, this is the completed Javits, lit up at night. Going through some of the stats. It was 415,000 square foot of curtain wall glazing, placement units, interior structural frame was painted. There's a lot of cleaning went on towards during the whole process. And we added catwalks for access out in the house. Lighting was put all new lighting in the third floor hall, Bristol Palace. pre-function areas. And exterior lighting also. There was 8 new entrances that were reconfigured, making vestibules where there wasn't vestibules before. There was extensive concrete cleaning. This is the deal path actually that's been cleaning St. Patrick's Cathedral, the same company did all the cleaning that we have done here and all the concrete, extensive concrete in the pre-function areas also. This is our largest green roof in Manhattan in the Northeast at 12.24 acres. It's flourishing. We are actually wrapping up all the final information, the warranty on that. This is all coming over. There's a maintenance contract that's been set up here. The spring they come in, they do a light fertilizing, they check, take any weeds, and it's an annual maintenance program that they come out. Under the warranty, the roofing contract also comes out and does inspections to make sure everything's in working order. Just a couple shots during the season. During the seasons, it actually changes colors. And this is kind of like a growth and a heavy growth in the spring. Just do some shots from that. I think Alan's going to get some views up there or something.
Next one.
Javits Gold. One of the scopes that was added at the end of the project was the terrazzo, and that's all been completed now. There's over 300,000 square feet of terrazzo. Not a replacement, more of a refurbishment. It was a regrinding, a recoating, recoating of it. The base of it was left over, and there was a new epoxy terrazzo put on the whole project. And the pre-function area of the Crystal Palace. The other large scope that was done at the end of the project, adding on to the scope, was the marketplace, new food service, new kiosks for retail, and this is all in the pre-function area and in the Crystal Palace. Also, the command center was upgraded. That's up and operational. Again, some of the issues with the fire command is all in here, voice evacuation. Security cameras are 4 times what was there before. All the perimeter protection has been upgraded, and this is all up and operational now. This is the drop-off area underneath the Crystal Palace. This had a major renovation on the ceiling, the lighting, the roadway itself, the concrete, everything was refurbished in here, which is a drop-off area for busing and for the hotels, transportation that comes to the site. 20 bathrooms were renovated, and this is all, a lot of this scope was the last scope at the end of the project we added on. And I guess that wraps it up. I just want to touch in, just wrapping up the whole project also with the MWB participation. We had, for the MWB firms, there was a 20% goal. We hit 23%, and that's without approved waivers. Approved waivers is a certain scope that is not, can be competitively bid to minority firms, and such as the roofing, the curtain wall system, that there's not firms available for that. So when we got approved waivers from the state on those, and that actually brings the numbers up to 40% for the prime awards. The second tiers are minority contracts within the prime contractors awards, and that was a 20% goal there. That came a little under, but in the same situation with, as far as approved waivers, we're up 16%. We're a little shy of the goals as far as the second tier. General conditions, 20%. We pretty much hit our 20% on that. That's with the underneath the Tishman's contract. We at 19.23%. So the total project dollars that went to minority firms is $117 million on the project as far as the trade costs. And the minority workforce, this is actually percentage of workforce. We exceeded the goals there. The goal was 25%, and we're at 40% for the workforce minority participation. So we've done very well. It's very, as far as all the requirements and meeting all the demands on that.
Les did an outstanding job.
Yes. Our partner, Les, was involved in a lot of outreach, a lot of work in the beginning, and then following up with each of the contractors.
You just have to work this to, if you don't stay on top.
Yeah.
and they did an excellent job.
As far as the project closeout, the trade cost is $361 million here right now. 59 of the total 59 contracts, 57 have been closed. 2 are pending and just wrapping up the closing. 7 contracts were assigned to Convention Center Development Corporation, and just to clarify that, there was some little scope that was some going on past our leaving in October. One of those examples, I guess, is signs decals, because some of these signs had to be done in between shows, and they're in the process of, I think you're working with them as far as getting the balance of those in. Some of the closeout of the terrazzo, because there was areas we couldn't get between shows, so we pulled out, we gave assistance to the house as far as setting that up, and then they finished up some of that work that they were.
And that assignment process was really driven by the fact that the insurance policy, which is a wrap-up essentially, was terminating at the end of October, and the cost of extending it another month was just so prohibitive that it made more sense to assign these contracts to the operating corporation. They completed the work.
So shouldn't that read CCOC, not CCDC?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Right,
CCOC.
yeah, no, it's to the operating corporation, and the big one is the one that's still ongoing, is the fire alarm. But Tishman does stay involved in that.
Yes.
But the architects have picked up the slack on that, and their fire protection consultants.
Yeah, I
So we will give you, this is essentially, we are just about there in terms of closeout. We only had 1 lien filed against us, which we are discharging as we speak. And we'll have, at the next board meeting, a full wrap-up of the final numbers, how much under budget we were, what the allocation was to trades, general conditions, and so forth.
Glenn, thank you. Any questions for Glenn or for Barbara? Glenn, can you show that?
Yes.
Thanks. Okay, those are the formal items for the agenda. Barbara, do you want to say a few words after I guess we should have a motion for adjournment and then maybe spend 30 seconds on
Sure,
pipeline?
sure.
So why don't we do that? Why don't we adjourn first? Can I have a motion, please?
Yeah.
Second? Thank you. Barbara, go ahead.
Okay, so I know we've spoken, and Joe Chan from the parent organization is here as well, and we've had extensive discussions on next steps. One of the things that, Alan has left you with a nice summary of all the benefits of this renovation to the operations, but clearly, as we all go down and look at the building or participate in the development that's going on in the west side, we are getting squeezed by all of these new developments. And even 6 years ago, when we did the renovation and expansion program, and we had discussions with people who service the building, the decorators, the over-the-road contractors, and we talked to them about trying to consolidate our operations on Javits property proper. They didn't want to have any part of that discussion with us. Fast forward 7 years later, they are very receptive to having that discussion with us. They find it increasingly difficult to operate, as they say, below 38th Street. We have given them some schematic concepts of how we can bring all of the truck operations on site, off-peak hours with some very sophisticated operating parameters. They are extremely receptive to it. We've had some conversations with the staff at the parent level and at the administration level. They've given us some indication they'd like to see what it is we could develop, what we could put together in terms of a program. So what we're proposing is that over the next 4 to 6 weeks, we will work collectively with the operating corporation to put together what we consider to be a robust program of how we could address these issues, how we could present a project for consideration by the board and by the parent corporation that would accommodate all of our operations on site, reduce the impact on the neighborhood, potentially provide some expansion, all of which we think could be self-financed from assets of the corporation. So we'll put together this plan for you. We'll come back in about 4 or 6 weeks with a robust outline and costs of what we think it might take to complete this, and then we can have a conversation.
I think this is exceptionally important and a very good development. I do want to say that, and I don't really understand what you're saying in some regards, but I suppose we won't really understand until the time comes. But it's not clear to me whether we should, in developing the program, whether we should attempt to do this ourselves or whether we should attempt to do this with external support. And I wonder whether we could have a brief discussion about that idea and that decision, because clearly, to the extent that we are going to talk about possible expansion or consolidation of operations, we're ultimately going to have to be involved with people who think about large structures and master planning, and who are intimately familiar with a bunch of things that we may or may not have internal capacity for. And I wonder whether when you say we're developing a program, how much as a term of art do you mean by that? What exactly are we doing? And should we be saying to ourselves, but should we be asking, who is the team that's going to do this? Is it a staff-only team? Are we relying on architects? And if we are relying on architects and engineers, I think I would want to know before we begin who they are and what the selection process was.
That's the process of what we will bring to you. Clearly, this is not something that we can sketch out among ourselves at the table. We need a lot of support.
Right. And so you're proposing to bring to us a process to get the support?
Yes.
I think that would
process for everything. How much it will cost, what kinds of outside consulting services will be required to get us to where we need to be. It's an extensive process.
Very extensive.
Yes.
Very important. Very
Can
extensive.
you clarify the goal for me? Because I'm still not clear.
The goal would be, essentially, is to present you with an opportunity to develop an on-site facility that would take all of the trucks off of the street and out of the neighborhoods, consolidate on-site, develop that operation, how it interfaces with the operation of the convention center, what kind of improvements we can expect to see as a result in the surrounding neighborhood, preliminarily what the ballpark cost of providing that kind of structure would be, what process we would need to undertake to develop it, to get all the environmental approvals, how long will it take, how much will it cost, how are we going to prosecute that, what would the process be, to give you the full outline so that you can make some decisions and give some feedback on how you see this structured and proceeding.
And just to supplement that, I think, isn't it also intended to get the trucks off of 33, 34?
That's the idea, is to
And
consolidate
off the
them all
streets,
on site, and so the corollary to that is, to the extent that we can monetize the assets of the Convention Center Development Corporation, so that this is all a self-funding project, it's obviously in the benefit of the operation and the surrounding areas that we begin to look at something like this, because clearly the operation we have now does not have a long shelf life.
So the marshalling yard and things like that don't really accommodate the layover activity that takes place?
Well, Alan can give you
They have
just
long-term
an
staging and that sort of
anecdotal-
thing?
We have a very...
Interesting.
Alan, I'll let Alan address it, because it's
The marshalling yard, as it's called, really is a temporary storage yard and accommodates about 110 vehicles at any one time. But we would get, for many of our shows, 300 to 400 vehicles, semis, plus a lot of smaller vehicles coming too. So it's inadequate for what we need, and increasingly as Hudson Yards encroaches with its construction projects, the streets in the area are becoming more and more congested. I actually was on the floor. We have the auto show moving in right now, and I was talking by accident to one of the major trucking companies today, and they asked for a meeting to talk about this very issue. We've obviously not talked to anyone about this, but they said it's becoming increasingly difficult when they're bringing in large amounts of truss, large amount of construction materials, and then large numbers of cars. It's increasingly difficult to operate, and it's becoming so prohibitive from a cost perspective that they're not sure how long they'll be able to continue to provide services to companies who want to come into the city and still make a profit. So we have a logistical issue that really means we need to take traffic off the streets and make it more acceptable to the developing neighborhood.
Right. So we've been overtaken by development.
We knew it was
That's a
coming.
positive
I
in some
mean,
sense.
Jeff, when
We saw the
first
same thing
started
happen in
this-
San Francisco when they built
Uh-huh.
Moscone. It was out there in the middle of nowhere. Now it's totally surrounded by apartment buildings.
I think the good news is that we're still 4, 5, or maybe 6 years away from being totally encroached, and if we act now or in an appropriate time with an appropriate amount of investigation, we still have time to deal with this problem before it becomes insufferable. But if we don't start to act, we will find ourselves in a very difficult situation in a short period of time.
It also means that as development goes our way, that our excess land becomes more and more valuable. So
Yes.
To put it in private sector speak, we have a shitload of excess land that we can unload for lots of money to pay for everything Barbara and Alan are talking about.
I think it's really important in that regard. I would like to say, I think it is exceptionally important that this process that you're doing over the next 4 or 6 weeks include a structure that will allow us to consider expanding the project, as you alluded to, and I think the use of these proceeds, and that of course was the $500 million I was alluding to before, shouldn't be limited to, in my opinion, should not be limited to addressing these very important operational issues, which must be addressed, but should also provide us with an opportunity to think about how we can make this into once again address changes to the structure to make it into the best possible convention center and to grow it, whether it's to north to the west, wherever. This process should involve the contemplation of that.
It does. It will. It does and it will.
Asking another question, I know that there is some surplus left over from the original project. Are there some small aspirational improvements that you could recommend or want to recommend for the building?
I think that's part of what we'll bring to the table to you to address. There are some excess collections, really. I mean, the proceeds are kind of limited, but we'll give you that budget breakdown as well. There are some excess proceeds potentially in the bond issue that we're looking at in the structure on the collection side. I have been discussing this issue with Alan. He's come up with some suggestions, but I think we'll have to balance it against the needs of moving a project like this forward. There will be costs associated with that. So we'll give you, and I'll be working with Joe and Sarah on this, in the next couple of weeks. So we will give you the full scope of where our assets are, what we think we can do with them, and solicit some input from you as well.
And if I could
So we'll
just,
give you this information.
if I could just say that I think that's a really important discussion, because one of the reasons why Javits was in such a condition was because of the lack of capital investment over many years and the lack of access to capital. Our operating budget is very thin, and it's not designed to have a capital attachment to it. We have been investing in some capital projects over the last 2 or 3 years, but we need to find a way to continue to make sure the building doesn't return to its state of disrepair. A lot of money, a lot of time and effort's been spent. I particularly like the quote that's in your sheet, which the Times talks about the renovation being a model for urban redevelopment in the city. And I think we don't want to lose that by suddenly finding ourselves in a place where we can't maintain the building that we've recreated.
I think that's very important. In that regard, could I just ask a passing question? I see the treasurer has left, but and Henry presumably has a view on this, or Michael, is there a reason we don't that we're waiting for the bonds to come to be refundable at par? The market would seem to be maybe moving against us. Shouldn't we be considering?
Well, I had that conversation with Rob, and you could do an advance refunding. It's a structural analysis. because if you do your refunding prior to the date, you have negative arbitrage issues so you're now having to weigh, so you're constantly doing, that's what your FA does for you or your bond counsel, you're constantly structuring negative arbitrage against favorable interest rates and hoping that between now and November, the interest rates don't, escape and they go so high that the refunding becomes, and at what point, it's yield curves where they cross when the negative arb and
do we have
the
a view
interest
on that?
rates.
I mean, I think we all understand that's the problem. We've all done this before in other settings. The question to my mind is, do we have a view as to what
They
is
are conducting that, yes.
And so could I in that case, I don't know, Michael, if you give this to Mr. Chairman, but it would be helpful, I think, as the board, considering our fiduciary obligation, to understand what our financial advisors are seeing and advising on the question of whether because as an interested party but a non-pro, I don't like the way the market is moving, and it would seem to me we might want to be in the market as quickly as possible. Michael, do you have any thoughts on this?
No, I don't think is they're looking at it. I don't know that anything's going to happen drastically between now and 4 to 6 weeks, but I just want to be part of that proposal. And if anything's going on in the meantime, maybe you just ask them to be aware of it. If anything's really imminent, they can kind of move quickly.
I did specifically ask about that because it'll be between now and November when.
Right. But you're saying they're going to report on that in 4 weeks on this on the same question of whether we should refund now or we should wait till November?
I hadn't necessarily seen that as part of that, but I can certainly make that an element of.
Yeah, I think we should. I mean,
I don't see any downside.
There's no downside
there's no
to asking.
downside.
Maybe an
I don't have
academic
any
discussion,
problem.
but if interest rates are moving, it may be a reason to accelerate a little quicker.
Correct.
We'll look at it.
Sure.
So we could, if we could separately ask our financial advisors to take a look at that and just tell us how badly the market has to move. Are we talking 10 basis points? Or are we talking?
Right. I think that's the analysis. Is when does the negative arb justify an interest rate shift?
Yeah.
Anything else? If not, thank you all very much.
Thank you.